Hi, I'm Lloydine.
And I'm Heidi.
And we are
the
U-Haulers. Hello. So we've been talking about religious trauma.
Yes.
And today we have Ann Russo. Did I say that right?
You sure did.
Awesome. And we're very excited. This is just seemed like it's come together at the perfect time. So I have left Heidi kind of in the dark about your story, but I know your story. I've been kind of listening up on you. And so I think you're going to be just so curious and enthralled, because the thing that really stood out to me is that Ann did not grow up like we did. We grew up in the Christian faith. My mom was very well known and it was a big deal. And Heidi's parents started a Christian school because the school in their area was not Christian enough. And so we both grew up very much in it, and then actually met as kids in a very conservative Christian program when we were not out. And then many years later, got locked down in COVID together and rekindled when we were out. So we have talked a lot about having episodes like finding a church, because I would just go to churches that would allow me to be there, even though I was gay, and they wouldn't let me lead, but I could serve, right? And that was fine. But then and then Heidi was just like, well, I'm not going anymore. But then once we got together, and we have 3 kids together that we raised together. And so I thought it was really important when I came into their life to kind of get back to church. And I'd always went to church, but it wasn't something I just wanted to go somewhere where they just allowed us to be there anymore, because now that kids are going to be taught, it really made a difference.
Well, they're going to be telling our 3 kids that your 4 moms are all going to hell, right? So
we really took our time, and we thought, oh, it's not gonna be that hard in LA. It was very difficult. We got asked to leave. Yeah, we got asked to leave churches. It was a thing, but we ended up finding a place that they cancel services and go to Pride with us. We just really have a church that celebrates and loves everyone as they are. And so our listeners went through that journey with us. But recently, I finally let them know that I had some religious trauma that I had never shared about. Vaginismus, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. I finally publicly said that that was something that I struggled with and didn't understand why. When I had come from a family that talked a lot about sex and how great it was, but it was very much, like me and Heidi teased that it was blasphemy and sex before marriage were like the same level sin at the top. Yeah. So Anne did not grow up in the faith like we did, and yet she went into full religious studies, bachelor, master's.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what I would love you to share with her and our listeners, why that journey when you weren't, because that was something we're all like, I had to go to Christian college. She went to Christian college. That was a thing, and you chose it all on your own. So
Yes.
So tell us.
Yeah. So twist, Heidi. I was actually raised in a queer household.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I was raised with my dad, my 2 dads, and my birth mom. So all of us together.
Oh, wow.
I was 5 to 14.
Okay.
And then I lived with just my dad's for a little bit, and then with my mom. We ended up moving into different houses at that point when I was starting high school.
Okay.
And so growing up, the church or religion was the thing that hated us.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right. So I was very hesitant about anything surrounding, I don't even want to say faith per se, but anything surrounding like a dogma or a doctrine.
Sure.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And when I was 18, I met some folks that were really into Jesus, and they're so not really understanding anything. We're non-denominational. It's about a relationship with Jesus. So I'm like, that's cool. Tell me more about this. Well, of course, I'm queer as well. And so I met someone there that I was just like head over heels.
Yep.
Yeah.
Relationship with Jesus. That is the phrase. I use that phrase.
Yeah.
It's not a religion. It's a relationship with Jesus.
Yes. And at that time, I didn't really understand that what that meant was an extremely strict conservative adherence to what they think the Bible is.
Yes.
what a
Yep.
relationship with God is. So I didn't understand that at the time, you know. And the more I started to understand it and the more I saw what was kind of going on with this person that I was very much into, and like the struggles and just the difficulty there, I was like, how can this be wrong? Like, I don't understand why love is a bad thing. Like, I just
Right.
didn't get it.
Right.
So I, being more into intellectualizing everything rather than feeling everything, I'm like, well, I'm gonna get my bachelor's in religious.
Just a deep dive. Look at you.
Yeah, I was like, because my thinking is that these folks that I'm going to church with, and I still continue to go to this church, but I would like to argue with, like, let's say we'd have heated discussions.
Okay.
I even went on a missions trip with this church as an out person. It was wild, like very wild.
Wow, it's wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I was always the person that we would get into really deep conversations around this. And I just could never really get down to what their belief system was, to that strict adherence. So yeah, so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go study this now at a deeper level. So I went and I got my bachelor's. Then I was like, I'm not done. I still don't understand what it means to have a relationship with God. How do people have a relationship with God? What is faith? I don't get this. Let me go get my master's now.
Wow.
So, I mean, I probably would have kept, I'm like, let me go. I'm going to go travel. I'm going to missions trip. I'm going to go to Southeast Asia. I'm going to do all this stuff so I can get faith somehow. And it didn't really end up working that way. What ended up happening was that I really started recognizing all the pain more and more and more so, especially with the queer community and this horrible position that you're put in if you are a believer in a faith that tells you that you're wrong, or in that high control religious environment that tells you that you're wrong, and then trying to navigate your sexual identity or your gender, and then you're trying to navigate your spirituality and your religion. And I feel like you get put in a really unfair position, a false position. Like, how do you begin to say, I have to choose one of the, like, how do you even begin to choose? I don't even know how that's done exactly. So I worked really hard on finding a way to create intersection. And I did a lot of work in the theology around the intersection of faith and specifically Christianity and the queer community. And then I went on and I got a master's to do therapy.
Okay.
Now I focused a lot with that intersection. But then as I was going more and more and more, I realized religious trauma is much bigger than the queer community, even though it's still my specialty. And then I recently got a book deal with Pessy, who teaches, they're like a big organization for therapists, psychologists that teach different things. And I'm writing a whole book on religious trauma and teaching therapists how to work with people that have experienced religious trauma. So that's
that's amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's so great. So I have so many questions.
Yeah, let's go. So you know what, I do too, but please go ahead.
Okay. So I guess maybe first it's a softball, but how did your dads and your mom react to this deep dive into religion?
No, that is not a softball
And a
question.
segue before that is, how did it end up that your mom, how did you all three or those three with you start living together? How did that work out? Where they take me back.
Yeah, sure. So we lived in a more conservative environment, and this would have been in the early mid 80s.
Okay.
And I was already around. I was about 3. My sister was 1, and my dad was really struggling with his sexual orientation. He didn't really know what was going on, and it was a really tough, very tough, just from what I understand from them. And my mom, who is a saint in my world, she was understanding to what was going on, and was like, go get therapy, go be yourself. Like, it was very interesting. And I interviewed her about this several years ago, and that was coming from her faith she was raised Catholic.
Wow.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, mom, okay. I guess you were pretty progressive there for the mid.
Yeah.
They call this now, that's so amazing. It's called a lavender couple. Have you heard that?
Lavender marriage.
Lavender marriage.
Oh,
So it's called a lavender marriage when there's this protective space where back when you had to, it was so dangerous to be queer, so you would marry and still get to live out your queer life. And that could be two queer people or it could be one person knowing the other is kind of protecting. And so it's a big thing on TikTok is, a lavender marriage. So I was like, oh my gosh, it was a lavender marriage. I'm like
yeah.
so impressed.
Well, when they got married, my dad didn't really know he was gay when they got
Right.
married, right?
Yeah.
So, but once he did recognize that, my parents did stay married, and then the three of us, five of us all lived together. And then, yes, we were not out because we were
Okay.
in a conservative area. Again, we moved, but to another conservative area. Don't ask me why.
So, and his partner lived with you as well.
Yes.
And then how was that kind of told to the world? Like, what was the thought on everyone just knew, or it was kind of hidden?
No. Wow. Okay.
No.
He
It
was a roommate. He was an
yes.
uncle. Okay.
A roommate.
Yes,
Okay.
roommate,
Okay.
a roommate.
Saving
They
money
tried
kind
to
of
go with uncle for a minute. It's so funny. I totally forgot that even happened until you
thing.
mentioned uncle. But yes, but that didn't.
That didn't fly. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
she
So
would date, or she never dated during that time.
he didn't date during this time.
Mhm.
It was very much like my parents. My biological parents are married, and here's a roommate.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And then at 14, when I was starting high school, we moved, and then we were allowed to be open because my mom got her own place. My dad's got their own place, and we were allowed to then be open. And I have to tell you that was very challenging because we had spent, 10 years being in fear.
Yeah.
Wow. I can't imagine.
Yeah. My sister and I actually just chatted about this the other day because as I'm talking about my story, it's her story too, and
Yeah.
what that was like for her and like, what do we do? And I remember she even just shared that when some folks would be like pulling out the Bible, like, she had a boyfriend and the mom pulls out the Bible and she, just like, here, let me tell you why your family's wrong, so just like very, very challenging things. But I mean, it was better when we moved to California. And
So you
then
kind of all had to come out. I mean, like
Yeah.
it was like a big coming out journey then. Okay.
Yeah, it was. And then I myself had to come out, which was still hard because
Yeah.
even though being raised by queer parents, I still had to be closeted. We were still afraid, and we knew that the world didn't like gay people. So that was like my worst nightmare, realizing my own sexual
Of
orientation.
course.
Yeah.
And you lived where before moving to California? Remind me again.
Arizona.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, worst nightmare was coming out, understanding my own sexual orientation. And I was around people that were out as bisexual. The 90s, I think, were really prevalent with this bisexuality thing.
Yeah.
Where I was living.
Yeah.
And I knew my orientation, but I still didn't even want to say it to the people that were already out or dating people
Wow.
of the same sex because the stigma and the fear and the need to be silent was
Sure.
real.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I mean, that shows you kind of the trauma right there because even in a safe space or, seemingly safe space, it was still hard. And I think it's still hard. We hear stories every day where it's still hard, even in,
Yeah.
2025. It's not, it's always, this hard journey and everyone has such a,
Well, there's always an extra step, right? You get to meet someone, you connect, you're having this, whether it's professional or personal or, whatever it is, even if it's just sort of, a casual social experience. And there's this little step that you have to kind of choose every time. Do I say it? I'm not going to say it. Oh, I'm going to say it now. Oh, did I wait too long to say it?
Yeah.
Or, like at my office, I'm an attorney and literally our like wedding is like
I grew up on
vomited
wedding
all over the
walls. Yeah.
And so I will occasionally just be like, well, I waited too long to say it. So I'm just going to invite them into the office and they'll just know, like, there it is. You can't miss it. But
Stick it with it.
it's this extra step, right?
Yeah.
It's
It shouldn't be, but it is.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny to hear you say that, because as you're talking, I'm thinking coming out is a journey, like a continuous journey. It's not, yeah,
Yes.
it's never just like, okay, I came out.
Mhm.
No, it's never done. It's
No,
never done.
it's never done. And there's always some level of hypervigilance around whether or not someone's a safe person to come out to. And
Yes.
it's difficult. And I think if you're not someone who has to keep coming out as who you are, it's not super relatable. So I hope,
Yeah.
it's like, because it's like, how do you just keep, like, you're just always in a position, like you said, meeting new people, new environments, wherever you go. Like it is difficult.
Well, and when you brought that up, I thought about there's so many people in my past, as you move and get married and get older, some people you're on social media terms with only, or some people you just grew up, like moved. There nothing happened, but I don't know certain people in my life because I'm out online. Are they not close in my life because I came out, or is it just because of normal life circumstances? Like, I always have to wonder because
Yeah.
I had such conservative, these are all the conservative, crowd and background in Christian college and all this. And so there's always what is the feeling on this,
And unfortunately, largely the burden is borne by, because you're, or at least it was for me, right? Where I'm like, well, I don't want to offend them, so I just won't reach out, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna bring this to them, right? This is my life. This is what I'm gonna do. So if they want to come to me, open arms, like I'm ready, I'm here, I can't wait, let's have a relationship. But I'm not gonna force them.
I did the same thing,
Yeah.
and then would find out that people were so excited about us and wish that we had, and we're just busy with life. And here are these missed opportunities of getting to be close to so many people because I was trying to, like
Protect them.
I said it, I put it out there, they can decide,
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because that feels so much like born from being raised in a conservative Christian environment versus my experience of not.
Yeah.
Because it like getting taught, like, we have to be tolerated, right?
Mm.
Are we,
Oh, wow.
right? Like, can we be tolerated? Are we okay to be accepted? Can we be in this space? And how do we move from that space to be like, you should be celebrating me?
Yeah.
Not just because of my identity as a queer person, but just because I'm freaking awesome.
Mhm.
Right? Like, how, and I think that's a really hard space for a lot of queer people to go from being tolerated to being celebrated. And I don't even want to say accepted, I mean celebrated. Like,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
shouldn't have to shrink our existence for other people's comfort. And I don't know how we get there. And I think that in certain religious spaces or conservative spaces, we do shrink. I mean, I know that I do it too. I can see it now. I didn't even know I was doing it, and I was like, oh, I'm trying to make someone else feel comfortable by making myself totally uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yep.
And how long
Or
would you?
or invisible. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
invisible, exactly. And
Yeah.
for why?
Yeah.
But that's trauma, though.
It is. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I didn't even, I just was like, oh, it's kind of my Midwest nice, right? Like I'm not gonna force myself. We have no idea what that's like.
Alexa.
I'm not gonna force myself to, you know, uh on someone, right? Because I'm Midwest nice. I'm from Wisconsin. Like we don't do that. And then
And what
it's
is
like,
that?
you're
And what
right.
does that mean, right? Like what are you forcing? Like, you're existing in the world.
Right, right. Yeah, and no, that's so true. Wow, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Anyway, but your fascinating story. So you at 14 you moved out with mom, right? Is that what you said? Or you lived with dad's?
Dad and partner first, and then with mom
Then-
for a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
And then at 18 went to this,
Your deep dive, which how did all the dads and mom
oh yeah, that's
handle handle your intentional on purpose by yourself decision to jump into that?
they all thought I lost my mind.
I'm sure.
Yeah, they all did. My sister as well. They're like, what has happened to you? What is going on with you? Fair. I
Yeah.
could see how that would look.
Right.
But I'm really grateful that I did, because I
Yeah.
had this level of understanding that I wouldn't have had really any other way. I think there's something so different about being in that environment and not being raised in it. I didn't have the same root.
Mhm.
So that helped a lot, because it was like I had to be convinced this was true rather than this is true. And it was a
Right.
total switch up. But by going to I went to did y'all ever hear of Exodus International?
Oh
Yes.
my God.
Oh, yes.
So I went,
I feel
yeah.
guilty now to say that. So they had a daughter ministry called Nehemiah Ministries, and I spent a good amount of time donating to that cause to help. I would read these newsletters of these gay people that, were not gay anymore. They were doing this amazing ministry, and I was like, oh, I gotta help these people. Look what they're doing. And so my money went to this ministry in my conservative, I mean, talk about full circle in my life, right? Before I had ever even had a thought that I was gay, because that was not even a thought that could be allowed in my mind. So it wasn't even that I pushed it back. It was just not there. And yeah, and then finding out long later that they had to apologize because all the newsletters I was reading were made up stories and lies, and those people actually were struggling and not healed and in terror, and he had to apologize to them. And oh,
So wait, you said you went?
so you went.
I went to a ministry. I went to an event. Yeah. Um, it was so important. So I want to just say this to you about the donation too.
Okay.
Don't feel guilty,
Okay.
because it's really the way that it's presented. It really does feel like you're helping.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Really and truly. I remember when I went to the ministry, and I am so grateful that I did, because I got to see what the tunnel vision really looked like. And I was able, and people, will still today, queer people will be like, what, huh? But I'll say, this is not coming from a place of hate most of the time. Like, it actually is coming from a place of love and concern, and you want you to be saved. It's it's just warped because of the information that is
Yeah,
received.
they believe it. I mean, they believe they're there, they're put on this earth for this reason. God has tasked them with, they are helping, they are loving, they are, loving you the best way they can. I mean, they
Yeah.
hook, line,
So
and sinker, yeah.
yeah. So when you say that you donated, my view is your belief was, I want to help.
Yeah, and I was reading all these supposedly at the time testimonials, right?
Yeah.
From people, gay people asking for us to support and kind
Yeah.
of now knowing that was manipulation, not maybe on purpose, but he wasn't being honest and has now asked for that forgiveness. But
Yes.
what was
Yes.
it like being there? I'm so curious.
I remember one of the speakers talking about how he was raised in a conservative, well, they don't say conservative, that raised in the faith, raised Christian.
Yeah.
And then he came out, and when he came out, he was hooked on drugs and just was promiscuous and just all of this negativity. And then when he came back to the faith and became ex-gay,
Hmm.
then his life got on track. He was back with Jesus.
Right.
So that really gave me some very important insight that sexual orientation is not really about sexual orientation. It's about this idea of if you're gay, it means these negative things will exist in your life. And if you can push away the gay, you can come back to Jesus. So it's like the faith can't exist with the sexual orientation.
Hmm.
So that was what I really learned, that and that self-rejection created those behaviors.
Hmm.
The rejection of the faith created those negative behaviors. Now, what if someone had said to him, great, okay, you're gay, wonderful, that's nice, see you at church on Sunday. Right?
Hmm.
In a very different path.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was
Yes.
very hard for them to equate that it wasn't the orientation that was the problem.
Yes.
Rejection that's the problem. So that's what gave me a lot of insight into my work, is why that was happening.
Mhm.
And that the real fear that people feel as friends or family members of people that come out, or the people that come out themselves, oh my gosh, what does this mean? This means I can't have a relationship with God anymore. This means I have to go live this particular kind of life.
Yeah.
Right. So that was what I learned from that experience, was the two, there was just no room in their minds and in their hearts that the two could exist together because of this false view of a gay orientation or queer orientation.
Yeah. I've had it from the opposite side too, right? Where a friend of mine who's atheistic had grown up in the faith and then chose atheism. Who she would say to me, why are you hanging on to something that hates you? And I just remember like the only response I had, because I was pretty young when I came out, the only response I had was, I don't want to have to choose. Why should I have to choose?
Yeah.
I like girls and I love Jesus.
Exactly. You were putting that false choice.
Yeah. It's
Not-
And it's interesting how it can be, because, in the Christian world, it's basically like, well, because if you don't choose, you're just constantly sinning. You're living a life of sin.
Right.
And in the non-Christian world, it's like, why would you,
You're like disrespecting yourself.
yeah, why would you have that sort of battle? Anyway, it's, yeah, and correlation, as causation is one of the biggest problems, I think, that people have in that sphere too, right? Where like, yes, of course these things are connected, but one didn't cause the other. And yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I heard you talk about kind of what she's saying. You talked about that you do have people that come to you for therapy that want to stay in the faith, and you help them navigate that. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we have to do is really tear apart the belief system. And what that means is, why do you believe what you believe? What is your values? What, like, did this come from your parents, from your church, from your culture? Like, it really digging down into why someone believes what they believe. And then I like to give a quiz, because it's like, I look at, like, like, especially with Christianity, it's like, it's a quite an intensive quiz. And it's really starting to pull some of that theological stuff apart. Who is Jesus? A, B, C, D. Okay. What is the Trinity? A, B, C, D. And like, it forces the person to really start to reconcile. Is the Bible inspired by God, the literal word of God? Is it like, so it's like, it really starts to like dig at what you think and why you think it and where it came from. And
I want to take the quiz.
I was going to say, that's amazing, because we talk a lot, because Heidi's faith is amazing, and she's helped me a lot, because she was raised the same way I was, and even sometimes in a more Calvinistic background. So even more, like the chosen and some are, some aren't kind of thing. And she struggled with it in just such a way as a young kid, where she was like, I'm not okay with what I'm being told, even though I love Jesus and I'm a Christian. I mean, you were how old when you really started to struggle with that?
I was teens.
Yeah. Were you even younger when you were crying in your bed?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I was, yeah.
You were
really
like
little.
tiny.
Yeah. I was crying because I didn't understand denominations. I was like, I don't understand why can't we just get along?
When a missionary came, right?
Well, that was even earlier. So we did vacation Bible school in my backyard. My parents were hosting it, and this woman was basically saying that like these people were fucked because they didn't have the gospel. They hadn't heard. My little empathetic heart just burst right open. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And of course, the answer was, "Well, go into missions." And I was like,
The rocks will cry,
yeah, and the rocks will cry out. And I was like, what? I've never seen a rock cry out. What nonsense is that? Like, that's bullshit. And I mean, I am stubborn enough to just be like, fuck all this nonsense. I don't want you to tell me the
parents
rocks
are like souling her in bed, trying, not knowing what to do, because she's so upset with the people that haven't heard that God, so already starting to.
But then I remember we studied Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. I went to a private school, right? Like private Christian school. We studied it as a piece of literature.
Where did you go, if you don't mind sharing?
Oshkosh Christian School
Okay,
Wisconsin.
in
okay.
Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Yeah. And I mean, I had an idyllic childhood, right? Like I
Same,
was
same.
beloved, I was cherished. I mean, everything about it was amazing, right? And just the way that I'm built, because I'm gay and because my brain doesn't really conform in those ways, right? Like I just am uncomfortable. If a concept is uncomfortable to me, I'm more likely to trust myself than I am to trust what I'm being told. People look at like I describe myself as bury the body, and there are instances where it's like I will show up with a shovel, and I do not believe in that, and I don't think you should do it, and maybe we need to get you some therapy, but I'm gonna fucking show up with a shovel. And
So glad that's on public.
I know, right? Like,
But wait, tell me about this literature
oh, okay. So we studied, and
before
this
we
is
get you
in my
arrested.
right.
Talk about literature.
I've never had to show up with a shovel, just so everybody
Yeah,
knows.
yeah. Jeff, why? That's not happened. You're just speaking.
Yes, not doing that.
Yeah,
Didn't bury
yeah,
someone.
yeah.
But so we studied. And I forget who wrote it, but it was a sermon. It was a puritanical sermon called "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." And there is this very dramatic visual description of like God holding strings, right? And there's this huge shears, right? And there's this idea of this connection, and you're of course dangling above this like fiery pit of hell and all this bullshit. So, there was this real terror that if those strings are cut, I'm fucked.
Oh God.
And then, that was the thing that I realized described the God I was following, right? Not that I was choosing that, but that was what I understood God to be, that I was still in this very puritanical, uh, like extreme religious sort of experience. And then it was I'm talking too much, because logically I said that's not what I want, that's not what I believe, really it's not, but here it is, that this is this thing that I relate to more than anything else I've heard. Caring, compassionate, loving God, like none of that made sense. It was all this sinners, and so I systematically went from that sermon that we studied to just break that down. No, I don't choose. I do not choose to believe in an angry God. I do not. So I'm going to search for and find, and as you know, like that bias, then if you're selectively choosing to only learn things about God that are opposite of this thing because you're trying to, and thank God, so from the time I was like 13, 14 years old until I came out in my very young, like 20s, which is still older than a lot of people come out. But I was like, I don't. So then when I came out, it was like, of course Jesus loves me. That's just a thing. And so I had done all this work, but I didn't know that I was doing that work to get healthy and well for what was going to happen. It was just that, like, I realized in that moment, oh my God, this is how I think. Why the hell would I follow a God that's holding me on strings with a shear right there over the fiery pit of hell? Like, so, but ever since then, of course, I've had much more of the Bible is this beautiful message, this beautiful love letter, this amazing book of stories that's meant to help us understand the universe from a perspective of faith, not this literal, terrifying thing.
And that's how she's helped me, because I was raised more that it's literal. And I was she would say things, or I would have people at church say things, and I would just big eyes. I'd be like, oh my gosh, my whole childhood was a lie. Like, I'm like, what do you mean? There was Adam, there was Eve, there was a snake, it talked, there was an apple. I don't know what you're talking about. Some like I was like, okay. So I'm constantly telling her, I'm like, wait, there are people that don't believe in hell? Like, I'm just like,
Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
mean? I'm like, wait, is heaven real? Am I real? Like, I'm
Yes,
constantly,
yes,
like, last week I
yes.
came home and was like, oh my gosh, do you think that this person believes that? Like, it mind blow. I cannot even conceive of it still to this day. I mean, I'm always like, wait, are you going to tell me it's one of those, like, stories, like, alligator, what is it called? Like,
Yes, like what? Yeah, metaphors.
Metaphor or
Yeah, and I'm much more comfortable in that world where I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't there. So I maybe it's literal and maybe I'll get to this heaven if there is one someday and they'll be like, this was all literally true. And I'll be like, badass. I didn't think it was, but okay. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, like if I find out someone found a piece of the Noah's Ark, like I get excited because I'm like, see, it was real. Like my whole childhood is still there.
You know, I do understand that though. I do, because that's why I studied it so hard.
Yeah.
Was because I was looking for the thing that was going to prove something. I don't know what
Yeah.
exactly, but I was looking for the proof.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was really difficult to realize there isn't necessarily proof.
Yeah.
And then I got to a place where I'm like, all right, faith is really not something you can prove or disprove. You can study, you can learn about culture and history, and maybe you get a better understanding of the human experience with God. But God itself, I don't know how we could possibly really know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can't.
that's, and then I got comfortable with that, and then I would, like, I think, and also sometimes there's a real cognitive dissonance, and I've seen this more with people that were raised in the faith. I mean, I remember in school, like I went to get when I got my master's at a Catholic college. I was in classes with priests and nuns, and it's the whole
Wow.
thing. Yeah, and
That's amazing.
sometimes you would learn something and it would be too much. And I remember people saying like, this just threw a huge wrench in this particular part of my belief system. And then I'd see them again and they go, I'm just going to pretend I didn't learn that.
Well,
It's so crazy.
It's that crisis of faith, right?
Yeah.
Where you are like, I will either deal with this and work through it and do all of that work, or I'm just gonna be like, nope, that was a thing that was wrong, and I'm just moving forward, right?
And I understand. I mean, I understand how it can happen both ways.
Sure.
And for myself, I was like, all right, I don't know. And I'm really comfortable with not knowing. And if there is a God and God gave me a brain and this brain has to dissect every little thing, that's okay, because I'm learning, I'm evolving. And I think that sometimes in the more conservative traditions, or the more literal traditions, they're trying so hard to fit new information into an old way, rather than just going like, okay, we're learning more things. Like the earth is what the earth is supposed to be just a couple 100,000 years old, right? Based on the
A couple thousand, right?
It's a couple thousand, I think.
Yeah, so a couple thousand years old. Well, that's simply not true. But the issue that happens in the literal Christian world is, I'm going to find a way to make that true.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, you're right. Why the mental gymnastics?
I remember being at Disneyland and one of my family members heard, and I mean I was right there with her on it, but one of my family members heard that my brother was with someone that did not, but that thought the earth was much older, and our entire lines for Disneyland was helping this person realize that that is not true and debating it. I mean, we spent all the
creation versus evolution.
Yeah, and just really just showing how many years the earth has been around, like that it cannot be what they I mean, it was, it was a real thing. And
Totally. I've been in those debates
Yeah.
on the other side. Like, just why, and I mean, it was incredible how deeply someone would twist their mind around to make, like, well, apologetics, right? That's what it is. But and so just being able to understand that science is as you get information, you try to understand it, and science will change as you get more information. With religion, I feel like you just have this fixed idea, and now I have to try to make everything that we learn and discover fit into this, and it feels like the antithesis of a God or a faith, even.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they learn something that, I always bring up I mean, I know there's still flat earthers out there, but okay. But anyways, besides that point, I always bring up about how it was a religious Christian God thing, that it was like the earth is flat. And if you thought anything else, I mean, you're burnt at the stake, you're kicked out of the faith, you obviously are against God. And then they realize, oh my gosh, the earth is round. And now,
or center of the solar system.
yeah, it would be the opposite. Like, they would be like, of course, why would you think that? And I'm like, but in history you did. So why is it that you think you're so right and can never be wrong and nothing can be different? And yet in history we keep showing this, oops, we got it wrong, now we think this. Oops, we
Well, look at the women's right movement, look at slavery, look at, I mean, every major like socio-political movement that we do eventually kind of move through, right? There's an astounding lack of apology from the church. There's no like, yeah, you know what, we really fucked that up and we are sorry and now we don't believe that. And I mean, you know,
well, now they think, well, those people messed that up. They did that wrong,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we're
yeah,
right.
yeah, we're
We
good.
have it right. We could not be wrong. We couldn't be the ones because they just didn't know. And I'm like, how come everyone before you just didn't know and you
Or-
are the knowing?
and why can't you look forward and be like, oh, so for the queer community, there will come a day
Yeah.
where we are getting it wrong.
And people
right?
will be like, what
it's-
do you mean
it's
that
such a
people
pattern.
couldn't just love? Like, people, you know, it's
Have the two of you looked into liberation theology
a
specifically?
little bit.
Look into that. I think you both would enjoy it. It's very much Jesus for the marginalized, and it really is.
oh, I'm
Yeah.
excited too. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Also, I really want to take your quiz.
Yeah, I'm like
Okay,
fascinated by
Okay.
fascinated that it really was important that you did these studies, even though
Yes.
you didn't know what it would lead to, because I think about the people sitting in front of you, and for someone to come into a therapist's office and that never grew up in religion and try to explain to them, like, you don't understand, like, my whole goal in life was to get a purity ring from my parents.
Yes.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Yes.
you know, or I kissed dating goodbye, you know,
Yeah.
or, you know, I mean, like, all these things that now that person's like, why did anyone listen to me? I was a kid, don't fucking kiss dating goodbye, you know? But I mean, this is the shit that we had to like take in as if it was like, you know, in our
Gospel.
veins, like, you know,
Like it was gospel.
it was gospel.
It was, and
And
it was.
it was,
Yeah.
we had a program, and I mean, it did a lot of good and it changed my life, but we had these 7 steps, right? And you could choose and you do these 7 steps. And um, one of the big ones, you know, you could do life work recruit, you became a pastor, right? You could quiet time, you spent your 15 minutes every day with God, and there's all these steps. And they ended up adding, it started as 7 steps, and then it became 9 because they wanted to add substance abuse and sexual purity. And I was the first, you know, one of the first to stand up in front of hundreds of people to do that sexual purity step in front of everyone. And then my big step was, I knew I didn't want to be a pastor, but I was a soul winner. I took the step to be a soul winner. And that's been something that's been probably the strangest for me, is because my whole reason for being on this earth was to win souls, right? And now to be in a time where like you just accept people and for what they believe and what they think and their journey and their religion and their culture. And I mean, that's a whole new thing from when I was raised, because we were the only ones that were right and they need us. They are depending on me.
Yes.
Like, whatever
those
I
damn
go
moms.
into, like, I had to convince them that I want to go into a secular career. I don't want to work for a church, but it's okay because I need to go out in the world and win those souls, guys. Like, I
And
got to be on that soap
right
opera because
there,
those
right?
souls.
Like,
Yeah.
think about that pressure too that you're putting on a child who will grow into an adult. You are responsible for the souls of other people, otherwise they're going to go to hell.
I know.
It's so scary. It's like, yeah.
I had someone approach me when I was graduating from high school, and I was very excited about being an actor. And they came and they said, "Well, I just need to talk with you because the only acceptable thing from God to be an actor is to go be an actor for Focus on the Family." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't want to do that." And he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Have you seen their acting?" Like, I was like, I mean, like, and he's like, "That is the only way." And I'm like, "Yeah, I really want to be on soap operas." Oh my gosh, I think literally that person. I'm surprised he didn't have a heart attack and he thought I was being struck by lightning. But I was like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But isn't that interesting though? Because I guess I think to myself, if God is what we say, all powerful, all knowing, all loving, why do we have to keep our world, our own personal world, myopic if you're a person of faith?
Yeah.
Like, is your faith that weak that you can't be on a soap opera or you can't study another religion?
Well, and why,
No.
even in what they believe, why wouldn't they want me to be? Because I always use the example of like Amy Grant,
Mm-hmm.
this singer that everyone thought was the greatest thing that had ever, Jesus had ever put into Christian music. And then she does a music video where she's sitting next to a man who's not her husband, and they're not even touching, they're going like this. They're rocking. And they kicked her off all Christian music festivals because the song went on the radio, on secular radio. And I remember I was very conservative Christian at the time, but I was very confused. I kept asking people, guys, only Christians go to Christian music concerts, but now her song is on the radio and people are loving her music. That's just these sweet little songs. The song she wrote about her daughter, by the way. And so they're going to her concerts, and her concerts, she's talking about Jesus. So she's reaching people the church can't reach. And you're mad about this, and now you've banned her from all music festivals? I mean, I think she was just like, well, then fuck you. And so I'm now going to get divorced and marry a country singer and just really piss you all off and live my best life. But
It's
But
true.
imagine the trauma that she went through.
Yeah, no.
oh my gosh, I can't, because she was put up on this pedestal and then just ripped down to the ground because she did this great thing that God actually, they show you in the Bible, asked you to do. So you think they've been proud of it. It made no sense.
But I think what you're saying, right? There's so much fear or cognitive dissonance, which to me is always expressed as fear or anxiety or, those things with being open, right? With not knowing. Because it's so much more comfortable to have the answer. And the answer is you don't get to be on the radio. Or the answer is you don't get to like women and Jesus at the same time. Or you don't get to, whatever it is, right? That is the answer. I think certainty, and I've said this before, I think certainty is the greatest sin. If we're gonna put sins in a hierarchical order, right, which also is bullshit and a paradigm I don't really believe in. But if we're gonna do it, let's just put certainty right at the top.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's so,
Self-righteous, yeah.
yeah, like how to believe that you know God better than anyone else.
Well, that God full stop, right?
Yeah.
I mean, period. At the end of that, right? Like that's just it. We don't. And we can spend our whole existence, you know, working on that and being better people because we're working on that. But if you decide you already know, like that's it. You've stopped your growth, you've stopped your curiosity, you've stopped your compassion, you've stopped everybody
There's
else's.
no open mind.
Yes.
And why? Yeah, why? Why so many things? But yeah, I mean,
It's a lot.
it's a lot.
I know it is, and these why these conversations are important, because I think that if people, especially queer people, can go, okay, there is a way for me to have faith, there is a way for me to learn, there is a way for me to do this, and people that are experiencing religious trauma, it doesn't mean I have to throw away my whole religion or my faith either.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
I feel like these conversations are saying to people, hey, we don't have the answers. We're not claiming to have the answers, but you don't have to lose your faith. Go explore, learn, be in touch with God. What does this mean for you in your life? And how are you living, your best life? If it's Jesus, who's Jesus? Who do you
Yeah.
understand Jesus to be?
Yeah,
Right?
I think if Jesus came down, one of the things he'd be the most sad about is in any circle you talk to, they will say the thing that is the scariest, the most judge they fear is from Christians. And yet in the Bible it says do not judge, and yet they are the most judged. But I do not believe in being that way, but grew up that way, are the most judgmental people that are out there. And are the most not loving to people that do not think exactly like we do. And why is it? Like, I remember having this thought all of a sudden, I'm like, so is it that I was raised that we just got lucky. Like so many people in the world just, oh my gosh, like they were fucked and we got lucky because we were the ones that got the right answer and they got all the wrong answer in their religions. And so we're just tasked to go and like rip their religion to shred and be like, look, we're the lucky ones, sorry. And it's just, and I don't understand why they can't just believe what they believe and still be like, we're not supposed to be judgmental. Like that there's no part of them hearing this hate that spews out of their mouth and think God would be upset at me if they want, because they can be the most hateful people and it doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, I think that's all of us,
Well,
preaching to the choir. But
it's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. I think that's just it. That's what it comes down to, is it hurts. When people are judging you or you see people judging others. And I think that's where, again, where we kind of have to show up, having been through experiences, and that requires us even to have love and empathy for understanding for the versions of ourselves we used to be.
Yep.
People that are still those versions, because I still believe that they're trying the best. They're just not having this exposure, this understanding. So there's different mandates for us now.
Yeah.
That's why I don't believe in cancel culture. Because I'm like, I would want to cancel myself 100 times over. But I grew and I'm a different person. And so if I'm allowed to change and grow and it took time and change takes time, why is no one else allowed to? Why do they instantly have to, or they can't when they drudge up their past and their tweets from 20 years ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
please
I'm
don't
glad I
find
wasn't
mine.
tweeting, 20 years ago.
Not helpful. It's
You know?
just not helpful.
No.
Yeah.
It's not the way to go forward. Well, this has been such a pleasure.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently we're taking a quiz now, so
I'll send it. I'll send it over to you both. And if you ever want to come back and talk and
I would love it.
podcast or not, we
would love to at least have you one more time. I would love to be able to just spend a little more time learning about some of the things that you would teach people that are handling people that have religious trauma, again, right? How do we move about the world better with people that we come in contact with that have religious, etc. All of it. I'm such a nerd. I want to take your quiz so badly. I can't wait.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
It's so funny. I love that. I love that because it takes time to construct it. You know what I mean? So I want people to be interested in it. And I would be very curious to know what your results are.
I'll send it back to you.
I will too, because ours are going to be very different.
Very different.
Awesome. And then they'll give you such meat to talk about yourselves that you not even have thought about, All right. Yeah. I'll send it over to you as soon as I get off my next call.
Okay. Well, thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Such a pleasure to have you.
So good. Yes. Same. We'll talk soon.
All right,
Okay.
thanks for all
Sounds
you
good.
do.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.